Good morning. It's wonderful to look out and see everyone here today. Thank you for your presence. It's particularly good to see the Quinn family from New Jersey. We helped support Nathan in the preaching of the gospel up there, and they're on vacation and passing through and visiting with us today. If you haven't gotten the opportunity to meet them yet, please do so. If you don't know who they are, they're sitting over here by the Fontenot's. Nathan is a good-looking young man with a peach shirt and a bow tie. You can't miss him today. And Nathan was a member here at Lost River when he was in college and has gone on to continue the work of the Lord in various places, and it's a delight to have them with us this morning, as it is each and every one of you. Well, our theme for 2025, we're having a little issue on the proclaim. All right, while they're working on that, I'll just go ahead and say it, that our theme for 2025 has been fixing our eyes on Jesus, and we're in our final series on that theme for the year, and in it we are remembering that while we are fixing our eyes on Jesus, Jesus is always fixing his eyes on us. Right before his ascension to the Father's right hand, Jesus said these words, "I am with you always." And you know, we need to hold on to that promise, because there will be times in your life and my life, there will be times in every person's life, sooner or later, when they will not feel like the Lord is with them. We always long for a sense of God's abiding presence, but there are seasons of life when it feels like God is far, far away. And if you're honest, there have been seasons in your life where you could echo the sentiment of Martha and her sister Mary when they spoke to Jesus after the death of their brother Lazarus, when they said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, our brother would not have died." Maybe it's an illness, maybe it's a disappointment, maybe it's a reversal in your career and educational or financial circumstances, maybe it's a struggle in your marriage or parent-child relationship. It could be 1,000 different things, but as we enter into periods of life that are particularly challenging, we sometimes feel that God has forgotten us or that God is very, very distant. And sometimes we just alternate in life between these two sentiments. Number one, where's God? Where's God when we need him? Where's God when we're hurting? Where's God when we're disappointed? And then suddenly things will change. Things will turn around and in a flash, to use a phrase of J.R.R. Tolkien, a eucatastrophe will happen, a sudden and unexpected turn for the better, and there's God. From where's God to there's God, and those moments are great. But I'm learning to see the value in both of these seasons of life. I've lived long enough to know that it is often in the very worst of the where's God moments that set the stage for a there's God breakthrough. In fact, every where's God moment in our life holds a seed of a future there's God testimony. If we will persevere through the where's God feeling, trusting that even though we don't sense it, we cling to his promise that I am with you always, we will eventually, one way or another, either here or there, experience the there's God breakthrough. So this morning, if you're in a where's God season, I think that our lesson this morning, the message from God's Word, will have something very meaningful for you. We're going to be looking into the book of Daniel as we study the topic of I am with you in the furnace. And we're going to be in the 3rd chapter. Now, I want to give you a little bit of background before we jump directly into the text itself. The story of Daniel is about 600 years before Christ. And King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon had come to Jerusalem, besieged the city, and eventually breached its walls and conquered the city. He spoiled the temple, taking many of the articles of worship and devotion to God with him back and put them in the temple of Marduk, his god, in Babylon. But not only did he take these items, he also captured many of the royal family and other nobles' children and brought them back with him as well. Now, there were a couple of reasons that he would do this. Number one, if you are in possession of the leadership's children, then the people back home in Jerusalem are much less likely to rebel or do anything to displease you because you've got their kids more or less held hostage. But there was another reason for doing this. In taking the best and the brightest from all of the various lands that Nebuchadnezzar conquered and bringing them back into Babylon, he could cull through them and find those who are really, really the very smartest, the most competent and capable, and then eventually educate them into places where they would enrich his advisory committees and so forth and be able to provide useful service in his empire. And so, as we get into Daniel chapter 1 first and verse 4, we learn a little bit about who these men were that were brought back from Jerusalem to Babylon. It says that they were young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and the literature of the Babylonians. So the Babylonian strategy for these young men was very clear. First, we want to capture their minds, capture their bodies, but then capture their minds. We want to reshape over time their loyalties and then slowly replace their worldview, slowly replace their religion and turn it into that which is 100% in alignment with the worldview, the beliefs, the values, and practices of the Babylonians. Kind of sounds familiar, doesn't it? But the book of Daniel is ultimately about these godly men, 4 of them in particular, who are living in Babylon and facing a series of tests to see whether their faith would endure through a time that was a where's God season for them. God seemed very, very far away. And what would these men do while living in Babylon? The particular test that they faced that we're going to be focusing on today is found in chapter 3 of the book of Daniel. And it is about King Nebuchadnezzar erecting a 90-foot statue covered in gold. And he summons all of the officials, probably other young men who had been captured from other places, and he brings all of them together at the capital city. And all of these officials are to come there for the dedication of this idol that Nebuchadnezzar has erected. He wants unity in his empire. And this idol is the religious or cultural symbol and glue that he believes will hold everything together. So, when all of the officials from all of the different provinces had gathered together before his golden image, this is what happened, beginning in verse 4. The herald loudly proclaimed, "Nations and peoples of every language, this is what you are commanded to do." Notice that this wasn't a suggestion. Again, Nebuchadnezzar is very serious. He doesn't want his empire that is composed of all of these various nation states, tribes, languages to be dispersed and scattered and divided. He wants absolute unity, and so he has brought them all together before this idol and is commanding them through his herald, his announcer, to do this. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing, fiery furnace. Now, I want us to understand that this was not an empty threat. In Jeremiah 29 and verse 22, we find a reference to 2 men that the king of Babylon roasted in the fire. But what will these young men do? We see that there are three young men, Daniel's friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who are confronted with this threat. They are being called upon to bow down before a golden idol that Nebuchadnezzar has set up upon the pains of death, and a rather gruesome death at that. Well, these young men are old enough and still remember what they were taught as kids growing up. And they remember from Exodus chapter 20, verses 3 through 4, the very first of the 10 commandments said this: "You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below." So here's what we need to recognize. There is Nebuchadnezzar, the king, who's up close and personal. His herald who is standing before him issuing his commands, a fiery furnace burning over here, and we're hearing the decree of the king that we must bow down and worship his image. But we are remembering in our minds and in our conscience the commandment of God that you shall not bow down and worship such things that men have created with their own hands. That this is not the living God, that this idol has ears but it cannot hear, it has eyes but it cannot see, it has hands but it cannot reach out and save, and you shall not devote yourself in worship and service to dead idols, but you will serve only the living God. Well, they do not bow down. They resolve to honor their living God and to remember what they were taught and to hold fast to their integrity. And so they do not bow down and worship. And as a consequence of that, you might think, well, nobody would notice. This vast multitude of people from all these nations are gathered here. Nobody's going to notice if three guys don't bow down when everyone else does. But somebody does notice, and somebody is upset by this, and so they report them to the king. They rat them out. And we're told in verse 14 that Nebuchadnezzar has them brought before him. Advance the slide, if you will. Nebuchadnezzar has them brought before him. And he says, "Is it true that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now, when you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipe, and all the kinds of music that I have established, you are ready, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I have made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing, fiery furnace." Now, archaeologists have actually uncovered many furnaces from ancient Babylon dating to this period. And many of these are industrial scale updraft brick kilns used to fire the clay brick that Nebuchadnezzar used for his vast construction projects. The furnace, we're told, was likely 12 to 18 feet in diameter and capable of reaching temperatures in excess of 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And so these men are told again that they have an opportunity to think through what they're doing, given a second chance, if you will, to bow down before this idol. And then Nebuchadnezzar asks them this question. He says, "Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" So Nebuchadnezzar is right there, and the furnace is right there, but where's God? That's the question. The king is glaring at them, the furnace is roaring beside them, the crowd is jeering and perhaps booing them, and heaven seems silent. You know, you don't discover what you really believe until you're put to the test. Peer pressure from our friends or our co-workers to dress a particular way, to go hang out at the bar, to do things that are immoral, or maybe peer pressure from our superiors to be unethical at work and to cut corners, or pressure that just emerges from within to violate our conscience and to trade the things that we value most for what we want right now. But the question emerges in those moments is this: do we have the courage of our conviction? Do we have the courage to match what we really believe to be the right thing to do? And that is exactly where these men find themselves in this moment. And so, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answer the king with these words. They say, "We do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold that you have set up." This is a great response. They say, "King, we don't need a lot of time to think this through. We have already made up our minds. From our youth, we have been determined that we are going to serve no other God. And so if you ask, what's our choice between these two, even though you're right here and we can even feel and hear the raging furnace beside us, we've already resolved in our hearts and we have the courage of our convictions and we're not bowing down to your image of gold. And so let it be known that our God is able. Our God can save us. We believe that he, unlike your idol, actually has the power to act in our behalf. And not only that, Nebuchadnezzar, we believe that he will. We're confident and inclined to think that he's going to intervene in this situation in one way or another. He's going to deliver us either from it or through it. But even if he doesn't, we want you to know that he alone is God and we worship him and serve no other. We will not bow before your idol of gold. You know, if you're in a where's God season, you will be tempted at one point or another to give up or to give in and go along. So you need to do what they did, and that is to confess your faith. You don't just need to hear about stories of what other people have done under difficult circumstances. You need to hear the sound of your own voice expressing your faith and your conviction. So what I'd like for you to do for just a moment is think about your greatest problem right now. Think about the greatest obstacle, the thing that you fear most, that which is most threatening to you right now. And for some of you, I know that those things are very palpable and very real and very near and seem very big. And I want you to think about how is the enemy using what you fear most and what threatens you at this particular juncture in your life. How is he using that to intimidate you? How is he using that to try to get you to bow down, as it were, to whatever idol is set before you? And with that in mind, I want you to confess with your mouth these words. I'll read it first, and then we're going to say it together. You are able to deliver me from this. I believe you will deliver me from this. But even if you don't, you are still my God, and I will serve no other. That's the courage, that's the faith, that's the conviction. And again, it's the thing that you need to hear yourself say it. So I would encourage you to speak loud and boldly and proclaim these words with regard to the thing that is threatening you and the enemy is using to intimidate you right now. So let's say this together. Speak it loud. You are able to deliver me from this. I believe you will deliver me from this. But even if you don't, you are still my God. I will serve no other. Well, I do believe that these things are so. And so I'm not changing my confession or what I believe or the one that I believe in order to satisfy a cynical and unbelieving world or to be intimidated by a defeated enemy whose bite is Our bark is much louder than his bite. And I'm going to continue to trust and follow God regardless of what this world can throw at me. Why should we bow to idols that have eyes but cannot see, mouths that cannot speak, hands that cannot save, when the living God, our rock and our Redeemer, has made the promise, I am with you always? Can you believe it? Do you believe that? Hold fast to the confession that you've made all the way to the end. Because, as we have seen already, every where's God moment is a seed that holds the future of a there's God breakthrough. In verse 19 and 20, we see that Nebuchadnezzar responds to their brave reaction with these words. He was furious, and he ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual, as hot as it can be made. Now, what that shows us is that we should not expect evil to back down just because we have chosen to stand up. In fact, this just elevates the situation. Courageous words are only powerful when followed up with courageous actions. And so King Nebuchadnezzar in verse 24 leaped to his feet after he had had them thrown into the furnace of fire. He leaps to his feet as he observes what's taking place. And he says to the soldiers, and has them thrown in, and then he says to the soldiers afterwards in amazement, weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? And they replied, certainly, Your Majesty. And he said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods. There's God. Do you see how quickly things can go from a where's God situation to a there's God moment? Now, there could be no certainty and there's speculation about this, but my conviction is that this 4th man that appears with them in the fire is none other than a pre-incarnate manifestation of the second person of the Trinity, the Son of God. In fact, that is the way that Nebuchadnezzar describes it when he first sees it. He has the appearance of one of the sons of the gods. And so a few verses earlier, Nebuchadnezzar was furious, but now he's fascinated. The fire that he meant to destroy them has become the fire that reveals not only the true character of their faith, but the God whom they have faith in. And so it says in verse 27, we're having a little trouble again. And the satraps and prefects and governors and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. They came out unscathed. You know, the things that we go through in life do not have to define who we are. The enemy wants us to smell like the trial that we've been through. But God wants to deliver us not only from the trial itself, but from the trauma and even the victim mentality that often goes along with it. The key to that is if we can see God with us in the trial, then we can come through it without being cynical, bitter, angry. We can have true victory over what the enemy meant for our destruction. And so in verse 28, Nebuchadnezzar says, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than to serve or worship any god except their own." It's amazing how quickly we've gone from a king who is full of himself, making demands that everyone worship his God and his God only, to a position of amazement at the power of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's God to deliver them. And now he's making a declaration that all people everywhere should recognize and honor their God. 90% of persuading other people about the reality of the God that you serve is showing them that you really believe it yourself. You'll never be able to convince someone of something that you do not believe in yourself. These three men did believe it. And they backed up their words with their very bodies. And as a consequence of that, and God's faithfulness, when their faith intersected God's faithfulness, the result was the heart of the king was turned. And the proof of our faith comes when our faith is tested under pressure. And that's why we can say that every "where's God" moment holds a seed of a future "there's God" testimony. May God give us the strength to steward well our "where's God" seasons. And if we do, we will see God come through, and there will be a story and a testimony to God's faithfulness and to his greatness. And here's why we can stand tall in each and every "where's God" moment of our life. Because Jesus is, if he's not the fourth man in the fire, he is certainly like him. And he never forsakes us, and especially in the furnace of affliction. And here's how we know that. Because before Pilate, when Jesus had the opportunity to deny who he was, he made the good confession before Pilate that sealed his fate. And then on the cross, Jesus chose to identify with us in our humanity and in our sufferings, and even taking upon himself the penalty of our sin, which was our due. Jesus identifies fully with you and with me in our suffering. And then in the tomb, our shepherd passed through the valley of the shadow of death itself. And so that means that no matter where we go, and no matter what we go through, we can hear him say, "Fear not, for I am with you always." And know that it is true. Well, this morning, if you are not a Christian, if you are someone who has not got that conviction to resist the idols, the pressures that this world hurls at us, because we have no God to serve. Nothing but what's convenient, nothing but what's self-serving, nothing but what's for me in the moment. That's no way to live a life. But to have a settled conviction, a true North Star that guides the course of your life like these three men did, that gives you strength and fortitude and courage in any and every moment that you face, so that you can stand tall, and stand out, and stand up, then we want to encourage you to come confess your faith that Jesus Christ is Lord, that you want him to be with you always, and unite with him by being buried in the waters of baptism, raised to newness of life, your sins washed away, and begin to serve him faithfully as he faithfully watches over you. If we can help you with that or with some other need, would you please come forward and let us know now while we stand and sing to encourage.